You don't belong in first class. Pick up your bags and get off my plane, now." Those were the last words Senior Flight Attendant Karen Miller thought she'd ever say to the quiet family in row 1. She thought she was protecting the airline's image. She thought she was wielding power. But she didn't know that the man she was humiliating, a man who left the plane without a scream, just a terrifyingly calm nod, had signed a contract 3 hours earlier. He didn't just have a ticket. He had the deed to the entire company. And when that plane lands, Karen isn't just losing her job. She's about to face a karma so heavy it will make the national news. This is the story of how one judgmental mistake cost a woman everything. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the frenetic energy of holiday travel. Outside, the tarmac was a grey sheet of sleet, but inside the exclusive Regal Atlantic Airways lounge, the world was hushed, insulated by soundproof glass and the soft hum of exclusivity. Darius Kingston adjusted the cuff of his charcoal sweater. He wasn't wearing a suit today. In fact, he looked decidedly casual. No Rolex, just a simple Apple Watch with a fitness band. No Italian leather briefcase, just a worn canvas rucksack slung over one shoulder. Beside him sat his wife, Maya, scrolling through her phone in a beige trench coat and leggings, and their 6-year-old daughter, Zoe, who was currently clutching a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. To the untrained eye, they looked like a family stretching their budget to fly comfortably. To the trained eye, the lack of logos on Darius's cashmere sweater and the way Maya's diamond studs caught the light whispered of stealth wealth. But Karen Miller, the gate agent and senior flight attendant for Flight 409 to London, didn't have a trained eye. She had a suspicious one. Karen had been with Regal Atlantic for 20 years. She wore her golden wings like a sheriff's badge. She was the gatekeeper, quite literally, and she prided herself on keeping her first-class cabin pristine. She scanned the manifest on her tablet, her lips pursed in a thin line of red lipstick that had started to bleed into the cracks of her skin. Kingston, Darius. Kingston, Maya. Kingston, Zoe. She looked up, her eyes narrowing as she watched Darius offer a polite smile to a passing cleaner. "They don't fit," Karen muttered to her junior colleague, a nervous young man named Ben. "Who?" Ben asked, fumbling with a boarding pass printer. "The family in the corner. Row 1. The bulkhead seats." Karen tapped her acrylic nail against the screen. "Those are full-fare first-class tickets, not upgrades, bought last minute." "Maybe they won the lottery," Ben shrugged, too tired to care. "Or maybe it's credit card fraud," Karen said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We've had a rash of it lately. Stolen numbers, booked flights, and by the time the bank catches it, they're sipping champagne over the Atlantic. Look at them, Ben. The bag is dirty. The kid is messy. They aren't Regal material." Darius stood up then, holding Zoe's hand, and approached the desk. He had a calm, grounded presence, the kind that usually commanded respect without demanding it. "Good evening," Darius said, his voice a deep baritone. "We were wondering if we could pre-board. Our daughter is a little anxious about flying, and we'd love to get her settled before the rush." Karen didn't look at his face. She looked at his rucksack. Then she looked at the stuffed rabbit. "Pre-boarding is for passengers requiring assistance, and Diamond Medallion members only," Karen said, her tone clipped. She didn't check his status. She assumed it. "I understand," Darius said, his patience uncracked. "I believe my status should reflect." "Sir, the boarding groups are printed clearly on your pass." Karen cut him off, finally meeting his eyes with a cold, glassy stare. "If you are in Group 1, you board with Group 1. We don't make exceptions because you want extra time. Maya stepped up, her hand gently touching Darius's arm. It's fine, honey. We can wait. Darius looked at Karen. He studied her name tag. Karen Miller, senior in-flight lead. He didn't argue. He didn't pull the "Do you know who I am" card. He just nodded, a small, unreadable smile playing on his lips. Create no friction, he whispered to Maya as they stepped back. It was a mantra they lived by. But Karen took his silence for submission. She took it as proof that he knew he didn't belong. And that little victory fueled her. It made her feel powerful. When the call for first class finally came, she watched them approach the scanner like a hawk watching a field mouse. She snatched the boarding pass from Darius's hand. The machine beeped green. Valid. She frowned, almost disappointed. She scanned Maya's. Green. Zoe's. Green. Hold on, Karen said, holding up a hand as Darius moved toward the jet bridge. Is there a problem? Darius asked. The system is lagging, she lied. She typed furiously on her keyboard, checking the payment method. American Express Centurion, the black card. She froze for a second. That card was invitation only, but then her bias overrode her logic. Stolen, her mind insisted. Definitely stolen, or a fake card number. Fine, she snapped, shoving the passes back at him. Go ahead, but keep the child quiet. We have high-value sleepers in the cabin tonight. Darius took the passes. His eyes hardened, just a fraction. We'll do our best, Ms. Miller. As they walked down the jet bridge, Maya whispered, She was lovely. Charming, Darius replied dryly. Don't let it ruin the trip. We have a lot to celebrate in London. They didn't know that Karen Miller wasn't staying at the gate. She was the lead flight attendant. She was following them onto the plane. And she had already decided that Flight 409 was going to be very uncomfortable for the Kingston family. The interior of the Regal Atlantic 737 was a sanctuary of soft beige leather and walnut trim. Seats 1A, 1B, and 1D were the prime spots, spacious suites with sliding doors. Darius lifted Zoe into 1A. She was tired, clutching her rabbit. Mr. Hops. Daddy, I'm thirsty, Zoe whined softly. I know, baby. We'll get some water as soon as we take off, Darius soothed her, buckling her seatbelt. Karen Miller swept into the cabin 5 minutes later, assessing her domain. When she saw the Kingston settling in, popping the overhead bins open and shut, her jaw tightened. She walked straight past Darius, who was waiting for a coat check, and began serving champagne to the man in 2A, a white man in a bespoke suit who was loudly talking on his phone. Champagne, Mr. Sterling, Karen cooed, her voice transforming into honey. Please, Karen, you're a doll, Mr. Sterling replied, not hanging up his phone. Darius waited until she turned back. Excuse me, could we get some water for my daughter? She's a bit dehydrated. Karen stopped. She didn't turn her body fully, just her head. We are currently conducting pre-flight service, sir. I will get to you when I can. Please don't block the aisle. The aisle was empty. Darius was standing inside his own suite. I'm not blocking the aisle, Darius said, his voice firming up. And you just served the gentleman behind me. Mr. Sterling is a regular, Karen said, emphasizing the word as if it were a royal title. And he is seated. You are standing. Sit down, sir. The pilot is about to perform safety checks. Darius sat. He took a deep breath. Maya shot him a look that said, let it go. But the tension in the cabin was palpable. Other passengers were glancing over. Some with sympathy, others with annoyance at the disruption. 10 minutes passed. The plane was fully boarded. The doors were about to close. Zoe began to cry softly. My ears hurt, Daddy. Darius rang the call button. Karen appeared instantly, ripping the curtain back with aggressive force. "What is the emergency?" "It's not an emergency," Darius said. "It's water. I asked 20 minutes ago. My child is in pain." "You are abusing the emergency call button," Karen announced loudly. The cabin went silent. "That button is for medical emergencies only." "Thirst is a physiological need," Darius said, his calm cracking, "and ignoring a passenger's request while serving alcohol to others is a service failure." "Are you lecturing me on my job?" Karen's face flushed pink. She stepped into his personal space. "Let me make something clear to you. I don't know how you got these tickets, but on this plane, you follow my rules. If you continue to be aggressive, I will have you removed." "Aggressive?" Darius laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "I asked for water. Is that aggression, or is it my tone? Or maybe—" He looked her up and down. "It's just my presence." "That's it," Karen snapped. "I consider that a threat." "I didn't threaten you," Darius said, unbuckling his belt. "I want to speak to the captain." "You do not speak to Captain Holloway," Karen shrieked. "Sit down. You are disrupting the flight." Zoe began to scream, terrified by the woman's yelling. Mr. Hops, the rabbit, fell from her lap and rolled into the aisle. Karen looked at the rabbit, then kicked it, hard. It slid under the seat of 2A. "Keep your trash contained," she yelled. That was the line. Darius stood up. He didn't yell. He towered over her. He was 6'3", a former college linebacker before he became a finance mogul. "You just kicked my daughter's toy. You are done." Karen stumbled back, playing the victim immediately. She grabbed the interphone. "Captain! Captain, I need security. Passenger in 1A is becoming violent. He's physically approaching me." "I haven't touched you," Darius said, raising his hands to show the cabin he was non-violent. "Everyone here can see I haven't touched you." "He's violent!" Karen screamed into the phone. "Get the gate agents back here, now!" Maya was holding Zoe, who was sobbing hysterically. "Darius, please," Maya begged. "It's not worth it. Let's just get off." "No," Darius said, his eyes fixed on Karen. "We aren't going anywhere. I paid $12,000 for these seats, and I expect to be treated like a human being." 2 minutes later, 2 large gate agents and a Port Authority officer boarded the plane. The other passengers in first class were whispering. Mr. Sterling in 2A chimed in. "He was being a bit loud, honestly. Just take him off so we can take off." Karen pointed a shaking finger at Darius. "Him. He threatened me. He refused to sit down. He's endangering the flight." The officer looked at Darius. "Sir, grab your bags." "Officer, this is a misunderstanding," Darius said calmly. "If you ask the other passengers, I don't have time for a debate," the officer said, hand resting near his belt. "The flight crew wants you off. That means you're off. If you resist, you go out in cuffs. Your choice." Darius looked at the officer. Then he looked at Karen, who was standing with her arms crossed, a smug, victorious smirk plastered on her face. She had won. She had asserted her dominance over the imposters. Darius looked at Maya. She was already packing Zoe's bag, tears streaming down her face. "Fine," Darius said. The calm returned. But it was different now. It was the calm of a hurricane eye. "We'll leave." He bent down, retrieved the dirty rabbit from under Mr. Sterling's seat, and handed it to Zoe. He slung his rucksack over his shoulder. As he walked past Karen, he stopped. "You really should have checked the passenger manifest more closely," Darius said softly. "I checked it," Karen sneered. "I know exactly who you are, a troublemaker." "No," Darius said. "You checked the passenger list. You didn't check the ownership logs." "Get moving!" the officer barked. The Kingston family was marched off the plane, past the economy passengers who craned their necks to see the criminals being ejected. It was the walk of shame, humiliating, degrading. Karen slammed the cabin door shut behind them, locking it with a satisfying thud. Finally, she sighed, turning to the cabin. Champagne for everyone. On the house. Sorry for the delay, folks. We just had to take out the trash. Mr. Sterling clapped. The jet bridge was freezing. The door to the terminal was closed, and Darius, Maya, and Zoe were left standing there with the police officer and the gate agent, Ben. "I need your IDs," the officer said, pulling out a notepad. "And you're going to be placed on the no-fly list for Regal Atlantic, pending an investigation." Darius didn't hand over his ID. Instead, he pulled out his phone. "I'm not giving you my ID just yet, officer," Darius said. "First, I need to make a phone call." "You don't get to make demands," the officer said. "I think I do," Darius said. He dialed a number. He put it on speaker. Ring. Ring. "Darius?" a voice answered. It was crisp, British, and authoritative. "Why aren't you in the air? We have the board meeting in London tomorrow morning to finalize the announcement." "There's been a change of plans, Charles," Darius said, staring at the gate agent, Ben, whose face was starting to pale. "I've been removed from the flight." "Removed?" The voice on the other end, Charles Hensington, the outgoing CEO of Regal Atlantic Airways, sounded confused. "Removed by who?" "Security. By the lead flight attendant, Karen Miller. She cited aggression because I asked for water, and she kicked my daughter's toy." "Good God," Charles gasped. "Darius, where are you?" "I'm on the jet bridge at JFK, gate 42. I have a police officer here threatening to arrest me." "Put the officer on," Charles commanded. Darius held the phone out to the officer. "It's for you." The officer rolled his eyes. "I'm not talking to your lawyer, buddy." "It's not his lawyer," the gate agent, Ben, squeaked. Ben had been looking at his screen. He had decided to Google Darius Kingston plus private equity. He was currently looking at a press release from Apex Capital that had been leaked on a financial blog 10 minutes ago. Headline: Apex Capital acquires Regal Atlantic Airways for $4.2 billion. Photo: a picture of Darius Kingston shaking hands with Charles Hensington. "Officer," Ben stammered, his hands shaking violently. You should take the phone." The officer frowned, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. He took the phone. "This is Officer Miller, Port Authority." "Officer Miller," the voice boomed. "This is Sir Charles Hensington, CEO of Regal Atlantic. The man you are detaining is Darius Kingston. As of 1 p.m. today, Mr. Kingston's firm owns 85% of this airline. He is effectively the owner of the plane you just kicked him off of." The officer's face went slack. He looked at the phone. He looked at Darius, who was checking his watch. "Is this a prank?" the officer asked. "If you arrest him," Charles continued, his voice icy, "you will be arresting the man who signs the checks for the airline's security contracts. Put the gate agent on." Ben took the phone, looking like he was about to vomit. "Mr. Hensington?" "Stop that plane," Charles ordered. "Sir, it's already pushed back. It's taxiing." "I don't care if it's over the Atlantic," Charles roared. "Turn it around, gate it, now, and tell the pilot to prepare for an immediate board meeting in the cockpit." Darius took the phone back. "Charles, don't worry about turning it around yet. Let them taxi. I want to handle this personally." "What do you need?" Charles asked. "I need the pilot's direct comms frequency," Darius said, "and I need you to authorize a priority override on the tarmac." "Done," Charles said. Darius hung up. He looked at the police officer. "Officer, you were doing your job based on false information provided by the flight attendant." "I don't blame you. But I am going to need you to escort me back to the gate desk. I have an announcement to make." The officer holstered his notepad. Right away, Mr. Kingston. Sorry about the, misunderstanding. Inside the plane, Karen Miller was pouring another glass of Dom Perignon. She felt light as air. The trouble was gone. The cabin was peaceful. "Captain," she radioed the cockpit. "Cabin is secure, ready for takeoff." "Roger that, Karen," Captain Bob Halloway replied. "We're number 3 for departure." Suddenly, the captain's radio crackled. It wasn't the tower. It was a localized high-priority channel, usually reserved for federal marshals or executive override. "Flight 409, hold your position," a deep voice said. It wasn't ATC. "Tower, was that you?" Captain Halloway asked. "Negative 409. We didn't copy that." "Flight 409, the voice came back, clearer this time. It was Darius. "This is Darius Kingston, the passenger from 1A. Karen, who was in the galley, heard the voice over the intercom speaker the pilot had accidentally left open. She froze, the champagne bottle hovering over a glass. "Captain Halloway," Darius continued, "you are hereby ordered to return to Gate 42 immediately." "Who is this?" Halloway demanded. "You're interfering with federal aviation frequencies." "I am the chairman of Apex Capital," Darius said. "And as of this afternoon, I am the owner of Regal Atlantic Airways. You are taxiing my property. Turn it around, Bob, or you can explain to the FAA why you kidnapped the owner of your airline." There was a long silence in the cockpit. Then, the sound of paper rustling. Halloway was checking the ACARS system. A message had just printed out from HQ. "Urgent. Flight 409. Return to gate. VIP owner Darius Kingston. Removed in error. Comply or face termination." Halloway went pale. He keyed the mic to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We, have to return to the gate. We have a technical discrepancy that needs to be resolved." Karen dropped the champagne bottle. It shattered, soaking her shoes in $200 vintage brut. She knew, deep in her gut, that the technical discrepancy was her. The atmosphere inside Flight 409 had shifted from relief to confused agitation. As the massive Boeing 777 lurched into a U-turn on the tarmac, the hum of the engines whining down from takeoff, thrust to taxi speed, was the only sound in the first-class cabin. Mr. Sterling, the loud man in seat 2A, slammed his empty champagne glass onto the tray table. "This is ridiculous! I have a meeting in Canary Wharf at 9 a.m. What technical discrepancy? The lights are on. The air is working." Karen Miller stood in the galley, her back pressed against the metal storage containers. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was trembling, not from the cold, but from a sudden, terrifying cocktail of adrenaline and dread. She had heard the voice. Darius Kingston. The name sounded familiar now. She remembered seeing it on a memo about a potential merger months ago, a memo she had skimmed and deleted. "No," she told herself, wiping her sweaty palms on her skirt. "It's a bluff. People lie. He's probably just some mid-level executive trying to scare me. I have the union. I have 20 years of seniority. They can't touch me." But then she looked out the porthole window. The plane wasn't just going back to the gate. It was being met by a convoy. 3 flashing police cruisers and a black SUV with tinted windows were racing alongside the fuselage as it approached Gate 42. "Karen?" Ben, the junior flight attendant, peeked out from the business class curtain. He looked like a ghost. "Captain Halloway is asking for you in the cockpit. He sounds bad." "I'm busy securing the cabin, Ben," Karen snapped, though her voice cracked. "Tell him I'll be there when we park." The plane juddered to a halt. The fasten seatbelt sign flicked off, but immediately the captain's voice boomed over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are not deplaning. We are boarding a passenger." A murmur rippled through the plane. Boarding a passenger? After pushing back? That was unheard of. Airlines didn't burn thousands of dollars in fuel to pick up a straggler. The cabin door hissed. The heavy lock disengaged. Karen straightened her jacket. She put on her best authority face. She was going to stand her ground. She prepared to yell at whoever walked through that door for delaying her flight. But the first person to walk through wasn't Darius. It was the airport station manager, a man named Marcus Thorne, who was usually seen sitting comfortably in his office. Today, he was sweating. His tie loosened. Behind him was the regional director of operations, and behind them walked Darius Kingston. He looked different than he had 20 minutes ago. The rucksack was gone, carried now by the station manager. He held Zoe in his arms, her head resting on his shoulder. Maya walked beside him, her head high, though her eyes were red. Darius didn't shout. He didn't look at the passengers. He walked onto the plane with the heavy, inevitable momentum of a glacier. Karen stepped forward, her instinct to block the aisle kicking in. "Sir, you were removed for security." "Step aside, Ms. Miller," the regional director barked. His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said step aside. Go to the galley. Do not speak." Darius stopped. He stood right in the center of the first-class cabin, in the space between the suites. He gently lowered Zoe into seat 1A, the seat she had been kicked out of. He kissed her forehead. "Is the bad lady going to yell again?" Zoe whispered, loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "No, sweetie," Darius said, his voice carrying through the silent cabin. "Nobody's ever going to yell at you on this airline again." He turned around. The entire first-class cabin was staring at him. Mr. Sterling in 2A was gaping, his mouth slightly open. Darius looked at Captain Halloway, who had emerged from the cockpit, looking ashen. "Captain," Darius said, "I apologize for the delay to your schedule. However, I noticed a significant operational failure regarding the treatment of owners and their families." "Mr. Kingston," Halloway stammered, wiping sweat from his brow. I had no idea. The report I received stated a disruptive passenger. If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me differently?" Darius asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Is that the standard of Regal Atlantic? Civility is reserved for the wealthy? "No, sir, of course not. I just meant—" "Save it, Bob," Darius said. He turned his eyes to Karen Miller. She was shrinking into the galley corner, clutching a coffee pot as if it were a weapon. "Ms. Miller," Darius said, "come out here, please." Karen didn't move. Her feet felt leaden. "Ms. Miller," the regional director snapped. "That is a direct order from the chairman." Karen walked out. Her legs shook. She stood in the aisle facing Darius. She was 5'5". He was 6'3". But the difference wasn't height. It was weight. The weight of moral authority. "You said I didn't belong here," Darius said softly. You were non-compliant," Karen tried to argue, but her voice was a whisper. "You refused to sit. You were aggressive." "I have the audio," a voice said from behind Darius. Maya held up her phone. "I started recording when you kicked Zoe's rabbit. I have the whole thing. Darius asking for water. You refusing. You kicking the toy. You screaming for the captain when Darius was standing still." Karen's face went white. In the age of social media, she had forgotten the one rule. The camera always eats first. That's illegal," Karen sputtered. "You can't record crew without consent." "Actually," Darius said, "on Regal Atlantic flights, the terms of carriage allow for recording in public areas for personal security. I wrote that policy myself during the acquisition due diligence last week." He took a step closer. But this isn't about policy, Karen. It's about instinct. You looked at my family, and you saw fraud. You saw ghetto. You saw doesn't belong. And you decided to punish us for invading your sanctuary. I was doing my job, Karen cried, tears finally spilling over. Tears of fear, not remorse. I have to protect the cabin. From whom? Darius asked. From a 6-year-old girl with a stuffed rabbit? He turned to the rest of the passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Darius Kingston. My firm, Apex Capital, acquired this airline today. I am your new CEO, and I am going to conduct a very short performance review right now. The silence in the cabin was absolute. Even the hum of the auxiliary power unit seemed to fade. Darius motioned to the station manager. Give me the manifest tablet. The manager handed it over with trembling hands. Darius scrolled through it. Karen Miller. 20 years of service. 3 customer complaints in the last 6 months regarding tone and rudeness, all dismissed by you as unruly passengers. Interesting pattern. He looked up at her. Do you know why I bought this airline, Karen? She shook her head, unable to speak. I bought it because Regal Atlantic used to mean something. It used to mean dignity. But looking at the numbers, customer satisfaction has plummeted 15% in 2 years. And today I see why. The rot isn't in the engines, it's in the culture, and you are the face of that culture. Please, Karen begged, realizing where this was going. I have a pension. I have a mortgage. You can't just... This is a union job. You have to go through arbitration. Darius smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. You're right. The union protects employees from unfair dismissal, but there is a clause in the collective bargaining agreement. Clause 14, Section B. Gross negligence and acts of malicious intent endangering the brand reputation or safety of passengers are grounds for immediate termination without severance. Safety? Karen shrieked. I didn't endanger anyone's safety. You kicked a child's toy under a seat, creating a tripping hazard during taxi, Darius said smoothly. And you falsified a security report to the captain, diverting a flight and causing a security incident. That is a federal offense, Karen. Filing a false report, that's not just a firing. That's a massive fine and potential jail time. Karen gasped. She looked at Captain Holloway. Bob, tell him. I was scared. Captain Holloway looked at his shoes. He wasn't going down with this ship. You told me he was physically assaulting you, Karen. The video shows he was 5 feet away. Karen looked around the cabin. She looked at Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, you saw it. You said he was loud. Darius turned his gaze to Mr. Sterling. The man in 2A shrank back into his leather seat, wishing he could turn invisible. Ah, yes, Darius said. Mr. Sterling, the man who clapped when my daughter was crying. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. Now, look here. I had a long day. I didn't know who you were. Again with that, Darius shook his head. It shouldn't matter who I am. But since it does to you, let's look at your profile. Darius tapped the screen. James Sterling, hedge fund manager, platinum flyer. You spend about $50,000 a year with us. That's right, Sterling said, puffing his chest out slightly. I'm a valuable customer. I pay her salary. He pointed at Karen. Not anymore, Darius said. He tapped the screen 3 times. Beep, beep, beep. Mr. Sterling, I have just refunded your ticket. What? Sterling blinked. And I have revoked your platinum status, and I have placed you on the Regal Atlantic internal ban list, effective immediately. You can't do that, Sterling shouted, standing up. I'm a paying customer. I'll sue you. You can try, Darius said calmly, but private businesses have the right to refuse service to anyone who violates our code of conduct. Creating a hostile environment for other passengers, specifically my wife and child, violates that code. We don't want your money, James. We want a better class of human being on this plane. Darius pointed to the door. Get off! What? Sterling looked around. I have a meeting. Not in London, you don't. Not on my plane. Get off. Now. Or Officer Miller can come back and escort you off for trespassing. Sterling turned purple. He grabbed his briefcase, muttering curses, and stormed down the aisle. As he passed Darius, he didn't dare make eye contact. He shuffled off the plane into the cold jet bridge, humiliated. Darius turned back to Karen. She was sobbing now, her makeup running down her face in dark streaks. She looked small, pathetic, and utterly defeated. And you, Karen, Darius said. Please, she whispered. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I believe you are sorry, Darius said. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry the power dynamic shifted. But you aren't sorry for what you did to Zoe. You enjoyed it. I saw it in your eyes. Darius stripped the ID badge from her uniform. He didn't yank it. He unclipped it with surgical precision. You are relieved of duty. You are terminated effective immediately. You will not fly back to London. You will leave the aircraft now. But my bags are in the hold, Karen wailed. How do I get home? That's not my concern, Darius said. You are no longer an employee. You are a civilian. And since you don't have a ticket, you need to leave the secure area. He pointed to the door where Sterling had just vanished. Go! Karen looked at her colleagues. Ben, the junior attendant, wouldn't look at her. The captain was busy checking instruments. She was alone. She grabbed her purse from the galley. She walked down the aisle, the click-clack of her heels sounding like the ticking of a clock that had run out of time. She passed row 1. Zoe was clutching her rabbit, watching her with wide, innocent eyes. Bye-bye, Zoe whispered. Karen flinched as if she'd been slapped. She hurried off the plane, the cold air of the jet bridge swallowing her whole. The door closed again. This time, the silence in the cabin was different. It wasn't tense, it was respectful. It was the silence of a room that had just witnessed a thunderstorm and was now watching the sun break through. Darius turned to the remaining passengers. He looked tired. The adrenaline was fading, leaving just a father who wanted to take his family on vacation. I apologize for the drama, Darius said to the cabin. We will be departing shortly. Champagne is on the house for the duration of the flight, and for those of you who stood by and watched. He paused. He looked at a young couple in row 3 who had looked uncomfortable but hadn't said anything during the initial incident. I ask that next time. You speak up. You don't need to own the airline to do the right thing. He sat down in 1A. Maya took his hand. She squeezed it hard. You were terrifying, she whispered. I was necessary, Darius replied, kissing her knuckles. Daddy? Zoe asked. Yes, baby? Can I have my water now? Darius laughed, a deep, genuine sound that broke the last of the tension. Yes, Zoe. You can have all the water you want. Ben, the junior flight attendant, was already there. He was holding a silver tray with 3 crystal glasses of water and a bowl of warm nuts. He was trembling slightly, but he was smiling. Mr. Kingston, Ben said, water for your daughter. And I found some fresh strawberries in the galley. I thought she might like them. Darius looked at Ben. He saw a young man who had been afraid to speak up against his senior lead, but who was now trying to make amends. What's your name, son? Darius asked. Ben, sir. Benjamin Wright. Ben, Darius said, taking the water. You saw what happened earlier. Why didn't you stop her? Ben looked down. She was my evaluator, sir. If I went against her, she could have failed my probation. I need this job. My mum is sick. Darius softened. He understood the dynamics of power better than anyone. It wasn't always cowardice. Sometimes it was survival. I understand, Darius said. But fear is a poor management tool. Consider your probation passed, Ben. You're the new lead for this flight. Take care of the cabin. Ben's eyes went wide. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Now tell the captain to get us in the air. We have a meeting in London. As the plane pushed back for the second time, Darius reclined his seat. He watched the lights of JFK slide past. Somewhere inside that terminal, Karen Miller was standing at baggage claim, waiting for her luggage to be offloaded, wondering how she was going to pay her mortgage. Somewhere in the taxi line, James Sterling was furiously calling his lawyer, who was likely telling him he had no case. Darius closed his eyes. He felt the thrust of the engines, his engines, pushing them into the sky. The karma wasn't just in the firing. It was in the realization that the world was changing. The old guard, the gatekeepers who thought they could judge people based on their clothes or their skin tone, were finding out that the keys had been handed over to new owners. And as the plane broke through the cloud layer into the starlight above, Darius Kingston finally relaxed. The Atlantic Ocean is vast, a dark, churning expanse that usually makes humans feel small. But inside the cabin of Flight 409, as it cruised at 38,000 feet toward London Heathrow, the world felt incredibly small. Specifically, it felt like a microscope was being lowered over the events of the last 2 hours. For Darius Kingston, the adrenaline had finally ebbed away, leaving a dull ache behind his eyes. He sat in seat 1A, the seat he had paid for, watching his daughter sleep. Zoe was curled up in a ball, her breathing rhythmic and soft, clutching the stuffed rabbit that had been kicked across the floor only an hour ago. Maya sat across the aisle in 1D, her phone glowing in the dimmed cabin. She wasn't sleeping. She was working. But she wasn't checking stock prices or real estate listings. She was editing. "Are you sure you want to post it?" Darius asked quietly, his voice barely rising above the hum of the GE90 engines. "Once it's out, we can't take it back. It changes everything. For the company. For us." Maya looked up, her eyes fierce. "Darius, she kicked our daughter's toy. She tried to have you arrested. If you hadn't signed those papers this morning, you would be in a holding cell at JFK right now, and Zoe would be traumatized. This isn't about revenge, it's about insurance. The world needs to see why the leadership is changing." She pressed the blue tweet button. "Maya Kingston. They told us we didn't belong in first class. They kicked my 6-year-old's toy. They called the police on my husband. Meet Karen Miller, the face of the old regime. Meet Darius Kingston, the new owner. Watch what happens when karma flies stand by." A Regal Atlantic. Just new management. Dash justice. Attached was a 45-second video file. It showed everything. The sneer on Karen's face, the kick of the rabbit, the hysterical screams for security when Darius was standing still, and the final, thunderous revelation from the cockpit. "It's done," Maya whispered. By the time the plane began its descent into London, 6 hours later, the world had shifted on its axis. Karen Miller was not on the flight. She was sitting on a plastic chair in the break room of Terminal 4 at JFK, waiting for an escort to take her to the public side of the airport. She had been stripped of her badge. Her access to the secure areas was revoked. She pulled her phone out of her purse. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it twice. When she finally unlocked the screen, it froze. Notifications were cascading down the screen like a digital waterfall. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp. Ping, 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 she opened Twitter. The hashtag #Karen on the plane was the #1 trending topic in the United States, #3 in the UK. She clicked the video. She watched herself. On the small screen, stripped of her internal monologue of justification, she looked monstrous. She saw the way her lip curled. She heard the shrill, irrational panic in her voice. She saw Darius, calm, composed, almost regal, and she saw herself as a petty tyrant. The comments were a bloodbath. Fire her! She needs to be charged with filing a false police report. I've flown with her. She yelled at my grandmother for walking too slow. Imagine kicking a bunny. Who kicks a bunny? Pure evil. Karen felt the bile rise in her throat. She ran to the employee restroom and vomited. When she came out, wiping her mouth with a rough paper towel, she looked in the mirror. The gold wings pinned to her jacket, the wings she had polished every morning for 20 years, seemed to mock her. She wasn't senior lead flight attendant Karen Miller anymore. She was a hashtag. Darius didn't go to the hotel. He didn't go to his townhouse in Kensington. When Flight 409 landed, a convoy of black Range Rovers was waiting on the tarmac. Straight to headquarters, Darius ordered the driver. He walked into the Regal Atlantic Global headquarters in Hounslow, wearing the same clothes he had worn on the plane, comfortable joggers, a cashmere sweater, and sneakers. The reception staff, usually trained to stop anyone without a suit, stood up and practically saluted. They had seen the video. Everyone had seen the video. Sir Charles Hensington was waiting in the boardroom, surrounded by the board of directors. The mood was funeral somber. Darius, Charles said, standing up, his face pale. The media is camped outside. BBC, CNN, Sky News. The stock took a 4% dip at the opening bell when the video went viral. It'll bounce back, Darius said, taking the seat at the head of the table. He didn't sit tentatively. He claimed the chair. Sit down, Charles. The PR team has drafted a statement, a nervous executive in a blue suit said, sliding a paper across the table. We frame it as an isolated incident, a rogue employee. Emphasize our commitment to diversity. Darius picked up the paper, read it once, and crumpled it into a ball. No, Darius said. His voice was quiet, but it echoed off the glass walls. We don't spin this. We own it. Own it, the executive stammered. Sir, the liability is that for 20 years, this airline has prioritized profit over people and status over service, Darius interrupted. Karen Miller wasn't a rogue employee. She was a symptom of a disease that you gentlemen allowed to fester. She thought she was protecting the brand because the brand was elitist. Darius stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the runway. Release a new statement. It should be 3 sentences. 1. We apologize to the Kingston family and every passenger who has ever felt judged on our planes. 2. We are conducting a top-to-bottom audit of our service protocols. 3. The era of exclusion is over. The era of Regal Atlantic begins today. Charles Hensington looked at the crumpled paper, then at Darius. He smiled, a small, genuine smile. I'll write it myself. While Karen was facing the court of public opinion, James Sterling was facing a much more tangible court. Wall Street. James landed in London on a later flight, British Airways economy, the only seat left, and turned on his phone to find 15 missed calls from his managing partners at Sterling Bridge Capital. He dialed the senior partner, Marcus. Marcus, look, I can explain, Sterling started, pacing in the Heathrow arrivals hall. The video is edited. The guy was a menace. James, shut up. Marcus's voice was ice cold. We just lost the pension fund account for the state of Illinois. Do you know how much that is? That's $400 million in assets. What? Why? Sterling gasped. Because the head of the fund is a black woman, James. And she watched you clapping while a family was kicked off a plane. She called me an hour ago and asked if our firm's values aligned with racist applause. She pulled the money. I can fix this, Sterling sweated. I'll issue an apology. I'll donate to charity. You're toxic, James. The board met without you. We're triggering the morality clause in your partnership agreement. Sterling stopped walking. People bumped into him, cursing, but he didn't hear them. Morality clause? You can't fire me. I built that desk. You're not just fired, James. We're buying out your equity at the penalty rate. You're out. Do not come to the office. Security has been instructed to deny you entry. We'll courier your personal effects to your house. The line went dead. James Sterling stood alone in the middle of Heathrow Terminal 5. A man in a tracksuit walked past him, recognized him from the video, and laughed. Hey, it's the clapping guy. Where's your first-class seat now, mate? James pulled his hat down low and ran toward the taxi stand, a ruined man. 3 days later, Karen Miller sat in a small, sterile room in the HR department of Regal Atlantic's New York office. She wasn't meeting with a manager. She was meeting with the VP of Legal. We have reviewed the flight logs, the passenger witness statements, and the video evidence, the lawyer said, not looking up from his file. I was stressed, Karen tried, her voice raspy from crying. We had a delay. I made a judgment call. You made a fraudulent call, the lawyer corrected. You told the captain the passenger was physically aggressive. The video proves he was 6 feet away. You told the captain he was refusing to sit. The video shows he was buckled in. That is a violation of FAA regulations regarding crew interference. You used the Patriot Act protocols to settle a personal vendetta. I gave 20 years to this company. Karen slammed her hand on the table. And you spent the last 10 minutes of that 20 years destroying our reputation, the lawyer said. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. Termination for cause. No severance. No pension bridging. And we are forwarding the incident report to the FAA. You will likely face a civil fine of up to $35,000 for filing a false security report. Karen stared at the paper. My pension. I'm 3 years away from full retirement. You should have thought about that before you kicked a child's toy, the lawyer said, standing up. Hand over your ID. Karen placed the plastic card on the desk. It felt like placing a piece of her soul on the wood. Escort Ms. Miller to the curb, the lawyer told the security guard. As Karen walked out of the building, carrying a cardboard box with a potted plant and a stapler, it started to rain. She tried to hail a cab, but 3 passed her by. Finally, she had to walk to the subway. As she swiped her Metro card, the irony hit her like a physical blow. She had kicked Darius Kingston off a plane because she thought he didn't belong. Now, he owned the sky, and she couldn't even afford a taxi. 6 months later, the rebrand was subtle but powerful. The gold and navy livery of Regal Atlantic remained, but the culture had transformed. Maya Kingston, now the Chief Customer Experience Officer, had implemented the Zoe Protocol. It was a mandatory training module for all crew. It focused on unconscious bias, de-escalation, and most importantly, empathy. Darius was visiting the crew lounge at JFK. He liked to drop in unannounced, not to inspect, but to listen. He saw Ben Wright, the young flight attendant who had brought Zoe the water. Ben was wearing a new pin on his lapel, a silver lead badge. Mr. Kingston. Ben smiled, standing up. Sit down, Ben. Darius shook his hand warmly. How's the job? It's different, sir, Ben said. Better. People are breathing easier. We aren't the flight police anymore. We're hosts, and the passengers feel it. Complaints are down 60%. Good, Darius nodded. And how's your mother? Ben's eyes misted over. The pay raise you authorized for the lead positions. It covered her surgery. She's walking again. I don't know how to thank you. You thanked me when you brought my daughter that water, Darius said, placing a hand on Ben's shoulder. You showed me that there was still something worth saving in this company. Darius walked out to the tarmac. A Boeing 787 was prepping for the evening flight to Tokyo. The tail fin gleamed under the stadium lights. He pulled out his phone. He had one notification. It was a LinkedIn alert. Karen Miller viewed your profile. Darius didn't block her. He didn't laugh. He just felt a quiet sense of closure. He locked his phone and looked up at the plane. He remembered the feeling of standing on the jet bridge, humiliated, holding his crying daughter. He remembered the anger. But he realized that the anger had been fuel. It had burned down the old structures and allowed him to build something new. He climbed the stairs to the jet bridge, not as a passenger, but as the architect of a new standard. The pilot was waiting at the door. "Ready for departure, Mr. Kingston?" "Yes, Captain," Darius said, looking down the aisle where a diverse mix of families, business people, and tourists were settling in. "Let's fly." Karma is a mirror. It reflects exactly what you put out into the world. Karen Miller and James Sterling thought their status gave them the right to judge others. But they learned the hard way. The true power is quiet. It doesn't scream, and it doesn't need a badge. It's the confidence of knowing who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. Darius Kingston didn't just buy an airline. He bought a lesson for every single person watching. Never judge a book by its cover, because sometimes that book owns the library. If you enjoyed this story of massive justice and instant karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were in Darius's shoes? Would you have fired her or given her a second chance? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.